Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. The Department of Transportation pushes ahead with its reduced physical distancing guidelines in public transport starting today. This even as experts and health professionals call the move ill-advised. The planned closure of cemeteries during Undas will now cover the entire National Capital Region. The IATF is in fact considering implementing it throughout the country. State health insurer PhilHealth is in hot water again after House lawmakers question its request to government to shoulder the premium contributions of 41 million Filipinos who are entitled to free health insurance. And state-owned Landbank now allows students to borrow up to 150,000 pesos for their tuition. Details of that story later in this newscast. We begin tonight with the implementation of a slightly reduced physical distancing protocol in public transportation. Some commuters say they are uncomfortable with the new guideline, while some experts are raising concern on its possible impact on transmission. Gerard De La Peña with the story.
Markings inside trains and buses have been adjusted to comply with the Transportation Department's new directive, that is, to relax physical distancing protocols. From what used to be a 1-meter gap between passengers inside public utility vehicles, distancing guidelines have now been reduced to 0.75 meters. This will be further reduced to 0.3 meters, ideally by the second week of October. Standing passengers were also allowed. The Transportation Department said this is to free up more space inside buses and trains as more and more people return to work now that the economy is gradually opening.
Ang capacity natin is 18 to 20% lang. So ibig sabihin, around 80% of the space ng capacity ng mga train system natin is nawawala. If we reopen the economy, anong gagawin natin dun sa 80% na yon?
But passengers seem to be uncomfortable with the relaxed physical distancing protocols.
Katakot din, siyempre. Kaya lang, wala naman tayong magawa.
Dito si safety na nakamask, naka-face shield naman.
But transportation officials are confident that COVID-19 transmission in public transportation may still be prevented due to the strict enforcement of the no face mask, no face shield, no ride policy. Passengers were also barred from talking, eating, or drinking while in transit. Marshals were also deployed to limit the number of boarding passengers. But the Department of Health seemed to oppose the move as it reminded people to maintain a 1-meter distance from one another while in public places. The contradicting reminder did not sit well with transport officials.
Kung hindi nila makuha yung gusto nila, huwag sila pumunta sa media. And mind them, we should call their attention. They're not the IATF, they're DOH. And we follow the dictates of the IATF, not with the DOH. We are co-equal branch in government.
Some experts have also expressed concern that the move to ease physical distancing measures could heighten the risk of COVID-19 transmission. Infectious diseases specialist Dr. Edsel Salvania, who is also a member of Health Department's Technical Advisory Group, branded the move as problematic. In a Facebook post, Salvania said there is no clear evidence to support the decision and that it may be too soon to implement it in the country. The Healthcare Professionals Alliance Against COVID-19 echoed Salvania's sentiment.
Pag titingnan natin ang curve ng pandemic na ito, masyadong maaga pa, no? At malamang na dumami lalo ang kaso at bumagal ang recovery natin kung gawin natin ito ngayon.
Meanwhile, a recent study published by the Collaborative Group for Modeling COVID and Mobility in Colombia shows that proper ventilation and shorter trips play key roles in easing COVID transmission among commuters. Local experts agreed to this.
So an enclosed space creates more risk compared to an open air space. We also know that the transmission is through what we call micro droplets.
Transport expert Robert C. suggests that air-conditioned PUVs like trains and buses should open some of their windows or put up a ventilation system to allow air renewal. He also urged the IATF to consider allowing more traditional jeepneys to ply the roads.
Tumataas rin yung risk of virus transmission pag kulang yung public transport natin. So this is why if we can bring back the existing supply of traditional jeepneys, it will still be beneficial in this short-term period. while we are still fighting COVID-19.
Transportation officials said they are willing to sit down and tackle the issue. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, We Are One News.
The National Police is supporting the IATF's plan to reduce social distancing measures in public transportation. PNP Chief Camilo Casculan says that despite the continuing rise in COVID-19 cases, the move to reduce physical distance among passengers is but part of the country's adjustment to the new normal. Casculan is confident that the National Police can come up with innovations to effectively implement the new physical distancing guidelines.
We need to adjust already. Tulad ng sinabi ko nga, kailangan natin magkaroon ng innovations. Hindi yung porke sinabi, bawal yan, bawal. Pag-aralan nyo mabuti, di ba? We will come up with innovations and other initiatives so that we would be able to better our relationships and our services to the public.
Pala spokesperson Harry Roque also defended the IATF's approval of the reduced social distancing guidelines. He says transportation restrictions need to be eased in line with the gradual reopening of the economy. Roque assured, however, that the health sector's calls against this move will not fall on deaf ears. The IATF will again hold further discussions on the proposed easing of physical distancing protocols tomorrow. Roque says the report on the matter has yet to reach the President.
Inaprubahan po yan ng IATF dahil hindi natin mabubuksan ng ekonomiya kung hindi po natin dadagdagan yung ating transportasyon. Pero siyempre po, hindi naman tayo magbibingi-bingihan sa mga opinyon ng ating mga medical frontliners. So bubuksan po uli ang usapin tungkol dito bukas po sa susunod na meeting ng IATF.
For its part, the LTFRB is ironing out guidelines for the resumption of provincial bus operations. In today's Laging Handa briefing, Transportation Undersecretary Artemio Tuazon said the LTFRB could release the guidelines for provincial buses within the week. Despite the gradual return to operations of public transportation in Metro Manila under the GCQ, provincial buses are still currently not allowed. Earlier this month, Interior Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya said the IATF will be discussing whether or not to allow provincial buses to enter Metro Manila. But he also noted that studies show transportation is one of the fastest ways to spread COVID-19. The Department of Health has announced it will revise its guidelines for the use of COVID-19 antigen tests for screening domestic travelers. This after the WHO advised against it. According to Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, they will be revising both their omnibus guidelines for COVID-19 response as well as their specified guidelines on antigen testing. The government had earlier allowed the use of antigen tests as substitute for PCR tests or swab tests when traveling to local destinations. The DOH was supposed to release the guidelines for the use of antigen tests this week, but they are now looking to release the revised guidelines next week.
We met a bottleneck over the weekend, no, when WHO issued their new guidelines or recommendations on the rapid antigen test. So meron silang pinalabas na article, and these where the recommendations para sa paggamit ng rapid antigen test. So with that, babaguhin ngayon ng Health Technology Assessment Council natin yung kanilang recommendations for rapid antigen. But hopefully, if we can present by tomorrow or Thursday, by early next week, we can already issue these omnibus guidelines.
All of Metro Manila's mayors have agreed to close cemeteries within their respective jurisdictions for Undas, although they may have to break All Souls and All Saints' Day traditions this year. Residents say they fully understand the agreed upon closure due to ongoing health crisis. Jenny Dongon with the story.
Metro Manila mayors unanimously agreed to close cemeteries on Undas. MMDA General Manager Jojo Garcia said during their meeting last Sunday, mayors of 16 cities and 1 municipality in the National Capital Region agreed to implement a uniform plan for this move. Cemeteries within their jurisdictions will be closed tentatively from October 28 to November 4 to avoid mass gathering and contain the transmission of COVID-19.
Kung isasara mo yan ng 28 to November 3, di ba? Yung kasi may psychologically ang mga tao pag malapit yung date, yung a day before, sineselebrate yan eh. Pero at least siguro kung mga 3 days before yan, medyo hindi ganun katindi at may spread na nila yan. Kasi maganda hati-hatiin talaga natin eh. So let's say mag-start ka October 1 hanggang 27, may 27 days ang mga tao para pumunta for scheduling. So kaya nga yung sinabi kanina na yung sa Marikina, 30% lang papayagan, may pass yan. Kung kahit na last day ang 27, hanggang 30% lang kayo pwede pumasok.
The DOH also expressed support for this move. Health Secretary Maria Rosario Vergeres says the closure of Metro Manila cemeteries is a good practice to avoid mass gathering.
Alam naman natin kapag kaundas, talagang yung mga tao talagang siksikan sa mga sementeryo. And that is mass gathering already and we would like to prevent that. Ang sabi nga ng mga mayors, as early as now, they are already announcing so that the relatives of yung mga nandun sa sementeryo ay maaari na makapunta pa konti-konti bago dumating yung time ng undas. So pag dumating yung panahon na yan, maaari makapag-recommend din tayo so that it can be implemented across the country.
Meanwhile, Garcia also lauded the plan of the Marikina LGU to give out passes for residents with scheduled visit to the Marikina Public Cemetery. Over the past years, residents have been flocking to the cemetery during Undas since it has enough capacity for around 50,000 people. But this year, only 30% may enter the Marikina Public Cemetery starting October 1. The MMDA official noted, though, that all LGUs may implement their own guidelines or ordinances to prevent mass gatherings during the holidays.
Maganda yung sa Marikina, kaya nga, if ever maglalabas ang IATF ng closure, iiwanan pa rin nila sa mga local government and how to implement. So I think napakaganda ng ginawa sa Marikina, pwedeng maging design yan for everyone.
For Minda's family, it is an annual tradition to go to the Marikina Public Cemetery during the Undas season to visit the graves of 3 of their loved ones who passed away. They would camp out and bring food at the tombs of their loved ones. But for this year, they will just commemorate the memories of those who passed away at their home.
Mahalaga talaga, parang mahalaga katulad sa buhay. Kasi ano mo yun pamilya mo yun talagang susundin mo. Wala akong magagawa dahil yun ang patakaran sundod na lang sa patakaran.
Meanwhile, Jay, whose father was also laid to rest in Marikina Public Cemetery, decided to visit his father's grave today, as he is in favor of the week-long closure of public cemeteries to ensure public health.
Tradisyon na yun. Hindi na mawala yun.
Yun nga lang.
Kailangan lang talaga natin sumunod nga dahil meron tayong pandemic. Kailangan natin sumunod sa rules nila.
Garcia meanwhile said that this one-week closure will somehow be a good chance for flower vendors to sell products to those who will commemorate Undas in their homes.
Sabi ng isang mayor natin, ito mas hinabaan nga natin from October 1 or ngayon pa lang September pwede na dumalaw. So mas hahaba yung hahaba yung pagbebenta nila ng bulaklak. Hindi na lang yung biglaan na isang buhusan, pero at least na-spread.
This made vendors hopeful that despite the closure of cemeteries, they could still take advantage of the move.
Magdadagsaan yung tao, pa isa-isa. Bali ganun din po. Babawi din namin, pero hindi kasi katulad nung Undas. Ang ngayon, katulad kahapon, grandparents, maraming dumalaw.
Garcia said they are looking to finalize their guidelines for Undas before October and submit it to the IATF for approval. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
The WHO reported the highest single-day rise in COVID-19 cases worldwide on Sunday, with infections rising by more than 300,000 in 24 hours. The WHO website stated that the biggest increases came from India, the United States, and Brazil, The three countries tallied fresh coronavirus cases of no less than 40,000 each. The three countries also currently lead global COVID-19 cases with infections over 4 million. Global COVID-19 cases are now past the 29 million mark. Around 10 million are active. Close to 30 million individuals have recovered. More than 900,000 people, meanwhile, have succumbed to the virus. Here in the Philippines, the death toll from COVID-19 has reached a new single-day high with more than 250 casualties. This latest death count from the DOH today is higher than the recent single-day high of 186 on Saturday, most of which were misreported as recoveries. That's according to a validation from the Health Department itself. The Agriculture Department has downplayed a recent study claiming that pigs are susceptible to COVID-19. Meanwhile, meat traders are warning that pork prices could hike this Christmas season due to limited supply. Shyla Francisco tells us more.
A recent study done by researchers from the US and Canada claims that pigs can be infected with COVID-19. In a non-peer-reviewed paper published last week, the study shows that SARS-CoV-2 can persist at least 13 days after being shot to pig. Of the 16 pigs shot with the virus, 5 displayed low levels of infection, while only 1 had clinical signs. Still, the study highlighted that no cases of livestock got COVID-19 through natural infection to date. The Bureau of Animal Industry assured the public there's no need to worry.
Hindi po talagang ganyan ang transmission ng virus sa ating natural world. So yan po ay sinadya po yan. Hindi po yan report galing sa actual na nagsaling yung baboy ng COVID sa tao. So hindi po dapat mag-alala yung mga kababayan po natin na nakabasa o nakarinig ng balita natin.
Still, the agency is still on the lookout for developments in other countries to prevent the possible transmission of COVID-19 in animals in such cases. The Agriculture Department recently lifted the ban on the importation of mechanically deboned chicken meat from Brazil. This comes weeks after the government imposed a blanket ban on the imports of poultry products after China reported in August that the frozen wings they imported from the South American country tested positive for COVID-19. The DA also reiterated its ban on pig and pork products from Germany after its recently confirmed first case of African swine fever. Similarly, there's also a ban on pork imports from Belgium and poultry products from Australia. But for Meat Traders and Importers Association, there's no need to impose a countrywide ban on meat suppliers. Hence, they are urging the government to stop with the ban or limit it to areas affected by various diseases.
So we should not make the problem worse by imposing unnecessary bans that are not based on science. We are all concerned about the health and welfare of our consumers, but you know, if they don't have enough to eat, they have nothing affordable to purchase, then that also affects their health and welfare.
The group added the Philippines is already short of local pork inventory due to ASF. Imported supply may follow suit due to limited production worldwide caused by the pandemic. This could even go worse if China sources pork from countries where the Philippines are currently importing. Local traders also warned that they may have no choice but to hike the price of pork products since they cannot match the prices China is willing to pay. And with the holidays just months away, prices of meat are expected to increase even more.
Sana po para masaya ang Christmas nila. Kasi expect namin itong December, mas tataas pa kasi wala na raw baboy. Karamihan sa baboy namin tawid dagat kasi wala na makuha sa norte.
The traders group has now submitted a letter requesting the DA to lift or limit the ban. The DA has yet to read the letter, but vowed that they will study the proposal. The agency adds that affected countries can also provide evidence to reverse their order of blanket ban. Shyla Francisco, VR1 News.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. PhilHealth officials were grilled yet again during today's House hearing on the proposed 2021 budget. This after a lawmaker flagged the agency's supposed overbilling government for premium contributions. Ria Fernandez with the details.
Marikina 2nd District Representative Stella Kimbo flagged PhilHealth's initial request of some 41 million Filipinos who are covered by law for a free health insurance. In the House budget hearing, Kimbo said such proposal was indicated under PhilHealth's first budget proposal worth 138 billion pesos. But this was removed when the Budget Department only approved the state insurer 71.3 billion pesos for 2021.
Pasalamat po tayo sa DBM at sila po ay nag-alerto po at nakita nila kaagad itong tila overbilling po ng PhilHealth.
PhilHealth Actuary Chief Nerissa Santiago tried to explain their computation.
Maaari pong isinama namin dito na makakasama po sa makaka-receive ng benefits or yun po mga hindi pa naka-register sa atin sa PhilHealth na mga miyembro na wala pang bayad na maaaring walang kakayanan na magbayad po.
But Kimbo said DSWD's list of indigents only totals to 28 million, which is far from PhilHealth's 41 million intended beneficiaries. The state health insurer says they also accounted those that are not yet registered, including those that became automatic members through point of service. Despite corruption issues with PhilHealth, the health department will center a big chunk of its proposed 203.74 billion pesos to universal health care. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III expressed openness to the idea of putting up PhilHealth offices abroad to boost collection. Newly installed PhilHealth Chief Dante Geran, who claimed to be more experienced in finance and management, also vowed to familiarize himself with public health.
One need not be a doctor to be a public health manager or expert.
Meanwhile, in the same hearing, the DOH denied anew the downgrading of nurse positions in government in view of the implementation of pay hike for the field's entry level. From the previous 22,000 pesos, starting nurses now receive 32,000 pesos or salary grade 15. This, however, affected the Nurse 2 position, which has the same pay. To resolve this, the DOH suggested to DBM to immediately raise salary of Nurse 2 to Step 8 amounting to 34,000 pesos. Deputy Speaker Henry Oaminal is willing to defend such provision for nurses when they take up the agency's budget in the plenary. But the DOH budget was stalled at the committee level after a Nakalusugan Representative Mike Defensor found the agency's response to his queries on health facilities enhancement program unsatisfactory. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
We'll take a short break. More stories when we return. Please stay with us. I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. Still at the House budget hearing, Bayan Muna Party List Representative Ferdinand Gaite questioned the Office of the President's huge allocation for confidential and intelligence funds. In today's hearings at the lower house, the proposed 2021 budget of the Office of the President's confidential and intelligence funds amounts to 4.5 billion pesos out of the requested 8.2 billion peso budget for the office. Gaite questioned the budget after Executive Secretary Salvador Medaldea admitted before lawmakers that he received no official report regarding the country's engagement with Chinese firms that were blacklisted by international banks due to contested activities in the West Philippine Sea. Gov't says these include the China Airport Construction Corporation, which is involved in the multi-billion peso Sangli Airport project.
I think with the resources na available sa ating Office of the President, hindi maaaring mag-rely lang tayo sa news reports. Hindi pwede tayo mag-rely lang sa media reports. Meron tayong 4.5 billion out of the 8.23 billion, more than half of the resources ng OP ang nandyan sa pondong iyan.
Other lawmakers suggested that the money be realigned to COVID-19 response and other agencies with meager appropriations. Kabataan Party List Representative Sara Ilago noted that the confidential and intelligence funds under the Duterte administration will balloon to 16 billion pesos once the 2021 budget is approved. She said this is 6 times bigger than that of the previous administration.
Bakit po sa gitna ng pandemya, no? Tama po ba na humingi pa ang Office of the President ng 12.98 million kada araw para sa black budget? Kung ito po ay maaari nating magamit, no? Para sa milyong-milyon na PPEs, sa mga testing kits, pagpapalawak ng capacity ng ating public healthcare system.
As the Laude family mourns what they are calling justice lost on their side, Malacanang says convicted U.S. Marine Joseph Scott Pemberton could still face sanctions under court-martial back in the United States. Maricel Halili reports.
U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Joseph Scott Pemberton may have been released from prison, but it does not absolve him from further proceeding back in his country. This is according to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, who is also the former lawyer of the Laude family.
Pero pag uwi raw po ni Pemberton, tuloy pa rin yung kanyang court-martial proceedings at doon po malalaman kung meron pang additional na parusang ipapataw sa kanya at yung kanyang qualification to remain in service.
Despite the absolute pardon President Duterte granted to Pemberton, Roque also insisted that the country is safe for the LGBTQ community. He said justice has already been served when the court decided to put the U.S. serviceman in jail. Pemberton was sentenced up to 10 years in prison after killing trans woman Jennifer Laude back in 2014. Roque explained that despite the decision of the president, Pemberton remains a convicted killer.
Bagamat nakaalis na po siya ng bansa, hindi po siya umalis na bilang isang desirable alien. In fact, sapilitan natin siyang itinapon sa ating bayan. Yan po yung ibig sabihin ng deportation. Sapilitan po yan. Hindi po siya voluntarily lumayas. Pinalayas po natin siya as an undesirable alien dahil siya po ay convicted killer. Ang binura lang po ng presidente yung balanse ng kanyang pagkakakulong kung mayroon pa. Pero hindi po nabura yung katotohanan na convicted killer po si Pemberton.
Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea also came to the president's defense regarding the issue. In a budget hearing at the lower house, Medialdea said Duterte has the sole authority to issue such clemency. Medialdea added that the government continues to review the visiting forces agreement with the United States. This is despite President Duterte's previous pronouncements threatening to cut the military deal with the country's longest-serving ally.
The visiting forces agreement po has vast effects sa Pilipinas and should be studied very carefully. Hindi pwedeng basta-basta mag-decide.
Roque confirmed that while President Duterte did not meet with the Laude family, they received financial aid from the chief executive 3 times. But if you ask the Laude family, they believe that they have been betrayed by the government.
The Laude family, especially Nanay Julita, feels so betrayed. I mean, he always believed that Duterte will not allow Pemberton to be released not under his watch. He always believed that Harry Roque would stand by the family, being the former counsel. So they feel so sad, they feel frustrated, they feel betrayed.
At exactly 9:14 in the morning on Sunday, Pemberton left the country for the United States. An hour after his deportation, Pemberton's legal counsel, Attorney Rowena Flores, issued a letter of apology to the Laude family and thanked the president for the pardon. But Laude camp questioned its sincerity.
Parang baliwala yung apology ngayon kasi hindi ko makitaan yung voluntariness, hindi ko makitaan yung sincerity. Kahit kayo tingnan nyo yung sulat. It was written on using third person, di ba? Hindi first person. Obviously, it was written by someone else. Hindi ba siya marunong magsulat?
Despite the absolute pardon, Pemberton will remain on the Bureau of Immigration's blacklist for at least 10 years, which means he will not be allowed to come back to the Philippines. Meanwhile, the Department of National Defense said the Philippines and the U.S. will craft stricter guidelines on joint military exercises to avoid similar incidents in the future. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
PNP Chief Camilo Cascolan is proposing cutting the working shifts of police officers from 12 hours down to 8. Cascolan says reducing police duty hours will improve their performance as they should get more time to rest. He stressed, however, that police officers will still be on call 24/7.
Considering that we are policemen, we are 24/7, right? But it's not because we're 24/7 that we need to tire our people. The best way for them to perform is have a very good schedule of their duties, most especially when it comes to beat patrol.
Over the weekend, Cascolan said he will not publicly shame police officers caught sleeping while on duty. In an interview with the Philippine Star, Cascolan said officials should get to know first the reasons why police officers fell asleep while on duty. Former PNP Chief Oscar Albayalde and Deputy Chief for Administration Guillermo Eliazar previously made headlines for publicly shaming sleeping police officers during surprise inspections. But Eliazar shifted his tone. He says he agreed with Cascolan's stance once against cop shaming. Still, he reminded police officers that they should not be caught sleeping during inspections.
Pag duty ka, dapat hindi ka natutulog. Kasi kung tutusin naman po, kung naka-off ka, dapat dun ka matulog, magpahinga. Pero pag ikaw naka-duty, dapat huwag kang patulog-tulog. Kaya ulitin natin, nagpapaalala ang ating Chief PNP, Police General Cascolan, sa ating mga pulis na gawin nyo ang tama para po naman kayo ay hindi napapahiya.
The Education Department has confirmed that 865 private schools will close their doors this school year. Based on their data, 374 of the schools were forced to suspend operations due to low or no enrollment, while 333 schools cited the COVID-19 pandemic as their reason for not opening in school year 2020 to 2021. A majority of these schools are located in Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Metro Manila, and Western Visayas. Meanwhile, Senator Manny Pacquiao has announced that he will sponsor 13 TV channels for DepEd's distance learning. The boxer senator says he wants poor students to continue their education even if they cannot afford to buy laptops for online classes. Pacquiao added that his team has already coordinated with the telecommunications industry to operate DepEd's 13 TV channels. The Landbank of the Philippines has launched a loan program for students so they can continue their studies amid the pandemic through Landbank's iStudy program. Parents, guardians, or benefactors of students will be allowed to borrow up to 150,000 pesos per student for 1 school year or 2 semesters. Each eligible borrower can apply for a loan maximum of 300,000 pesos. Short-term loans that are payable for 1 year are available for preschool, primary, and secondary students, while long-term loans payable over 3 years, inclusive of 1-year grace period, are available for college students. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.